All right. Welcome back, everyone, for the final session of Water and Communications. I am very, very excited. I've had a terrific time with all of you, and I'm really excited for this final session. I want to thank the Grundfos Foundation for making this program happen. Before we get started, as usual, please choose your language in the interpretation. In the menu bar of Zoom, you will have the globe icon as usual, where you can choose English, Spanish, or Arabic, so we can hear each other in the language of our preference. If you have any issues with that, please contact me or Shay in the chat. Shay is always here to make sure everything runs smoothly. So thanks a lot for your support, Shay, around all this program. Just a quick recap on this is the last session, but it's not the last step of our journey together. We have this on August 14th. We have this additional session, which is an open session for you to talk about your projects. We have this form for you to submit your story by tomorrow. So we have time next week to review the stories and pick 5 of you to present your project on August 14th. Then you will have 5 minutes to present, and then you will be placed in breakout rooms to discuss with others. So even if you don't have any projects to share, you can definitely contribute to others with solutions, ideas, network. Yeah, this is really a session for you to network. Between that, there will be a wrap-up email coming from me at the end of this week with links to the sessions recording, the session slides, the session notes, and of course the evaluation survey. And we really encourage you to fill up the survey so we can take your input, your insight, your ideas to build a stronger program next year. And at the end of August, of course, I hope to see most of you at World Water Week, either online or in person. I will be there in person. If you are too, please reach out to me, and then we can get together a little bit and learn from each other. And all along, even far after World Water Week, you will still have access to the recordings and to the Google Drive with the session slides and everything. And all those links will be shared in the chat, but also in the email. So don't worry about that. And yeah, I really wanted to thank the Grundfos Foundation, and I believe that Anne Christensen is with us today. Anne, if you want to say a few words.
Just a few words from me. Hello, everyone, and greetings from Bjerringbro in Denmark, where we are based. The Grundfos Foundation is the majority owner of the Grundfos Group, which is a large pump manufacturer and water supply chain something. They're moving into water access as well, and helping companies reduce their water consumption all over the world. We're also working with cities to build more sustainable water strategies through the C40 network. Through our engagement with World Water Week and this program, we are hoping, of course, that you are all going to help further the water agenda in your various outlets and help the world get more wise on water. So, of course, we hope that you have all benefited from this program, and that you will also take it with you and also contribute to the session that's coming in August. And then we will also be present at World Water Week. We will have an exhibition booth where we are usually participating together with a lot of partners at World Water Week, and we will also have an online booth where you can interact with the foundation during World Water Week if you're participating online. So that's, I think, it from me. I hope you've enjoyed it, and I hope to see some of you at World Water Week.
Thanks a lot, Anne, and thanks again for your support and your collaboration on this program. Now let's dive into the session for today. I'm very excited about that topic myself, and I want to introduce Max Boykoff, who will be facilitating this workshop today. Max is a professor at the Environmental Studies Department at the University of Colorado, Boulder, and has been serving as the department chair. He is also a fellow in the Cooperative Institute for Research in Environmental Sciences. Max has ongoing research interests in science and environmental communications, science policy interactions, political economy, business, and the environment, with negotiations, marketing, advertising, and advertising concentrations. Max has experience working in several country contexts and is the co-author of 7 books and edited volumes. Along with many articles and reports and books chapter, Max also leads the Media and Climate Change Observatory, the MECO, while he co-directs the Inside the Greenhouse initiative. So Max, over to you.
Thank you, Cecile. Hello, everyone. I hope you can hear me all right. I'm pleased to join you all from Boulder, Colorado, here in the United States. And what I have in mind for us across these 90 minutes together, slightly less at this point, but across this session together is that I'll introduce some of the work that I do, walk through some PowerPoint slides just to guide the conversations. I certainly welcome any comments or questions along the way. If I don't spot them, maybe Shay or Cecile, if you could point them out or just intervene, and happy to address them as they come up. And then we'll move into a little bit of workshop activity and return for some concluding thoughts. Along the way, I have some examples, short videos, nothing more than just a minute or so each, just to provide for you a bit of an illustration of the kind of work that I'll be walking through. And so what I've been asked to talk about here is how to use comedy for climate change engagement. And so hopefully you can see my screen. I'll put it in slide share mode, and then I'll change this. So can you all see my screen now?
We can see it.
I cannot see you any longer. Great. So what I'll be talking about is climate-themed comedy to advance conversations, engagement, and action. My hope is that this will be of interest and useful to you all, so that you can then potentially integrate some of this work into your own. So what I'll do is just set the stage to begin. I'm here at the University of Colorado Boulder, but working with partners around the country, around the world. And with that kind of, I suppose, global sense of the work that we're doing, it's potentially useful to first begin with a consideration of where we've been, where we're at, where we're going, along the lines of scientific considerations and key indicators of a changing planet. So there's many ways that we could think about these key indicators of a changing planet. I start through the sciences, where I've had training thinking about how the planet's atmosphere is now more of the main heat-trapping greenhouse gases, such as carbon dioxide on the left of the figure here, methane in the middle, nitrous oxide on the right in the top panels, more than any time in human history. It's been over 800,000 years since we've seen these levels. And greenhouse gas emissions, while they did diminish during the COVID-19 pandemic, that they've continued to rebound. Some of these figures coming out of the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, which is a large funder of the institute where I work. Some of these coming from the Environmental Protection Agency here in the United States, showing that levels have gone up. Some of these coming from NASA as well, that the past 10 years have been the hottest years in recorded history. Fossil fuel use still continues to go up. The International Environment Agency has forecasted ongoing increased consumption and fossil fuel use. Global sea levels continue to rise. The bottom left panel shows the global ocean heat content continues to increase, while on the bottom right, ice extent, Arctic sea ice extent continues to diminish. And, there are also many other indicators, such as there was a recent study in Nature, the journal Nature, calculating that climate change's economic burden will amount to 38 trillion US dollars by the year 2049, by mid-century, reducing income 19% compared to a world without climate change. So we're facing many interconnected challenges. Climate change is not a single issue. It's worth pointing out that the challenges and the issues associated with climate change weave themselves into every aspect of our lives, our livelihoods, how we work, play, relax, recreate in society. And so considerations around greenhouse gases, which I highlight in these top panels, along with their influence in the atmosphere and in our daily lives, are very important to our considerations of how we interact with each other every day. Climate change remains one of the most prominent existential challenges, and as it is not a single issue, but it is a threat multiplier or an intersecting set of challenges that weaves through other critical issues such as public health, food availability, food quality, foreign policy, energy security, poverty, and socioeconomic inequality or efforts to achieve equality, immigration, migration across this planet within countries, and on and on. Essentially, climate change represents a collective action problem, which is really a consequence of our shared behaviors and cuts to the heart of how we are all interacting together. And as we are focused in on World Water Week and focused in on water issues, we can certainly see the intersections as well with water quality, water availability, challenges, as well as opportunities. Through all of this together, through this dynamism, through these interactions, it is important at its core to find common ground with each other across political, social, economic, cultural dimensions that are critical for the success of sustained and enduring engagement and action. Under these circumstances, then we can ask questions of how can we creatively and effectively spark productive conversations as pathways to action and engagement across these different domains. So in other words, engaging with people of various backgrounds, of various perspectives, across nationalities, across cultures, as we have the opportunity to do so here, across languages, help us address how we can shape a better future for us all that can be cleaner, safer, healthier, more secure water, atmosphere, environments overall. So that leads me into these considerations around taking up climate change. And so as you can see at the bottom of this figure as well, that stepwise approach is no longer an option. We need system-wide transformation. This comes from the UN Environment Program, and we need to be providing new ways in which we're engaging very fundamentally with the challenges that we see today. So as I pivot into creative climate communications in 2025, the questions that I ask as a researcher with the various collaborators and partners that I work with is basically this essential set of questions that drives forward the research that I do. What kinds of creative climate change communications can work? Where, when, why, under what conditions in a 21st century communication environment? We can think about a 20th century communication environment, maybe in very broad terms, as the notion of maybe dumbing down information for an audience so that they get it, quote unquote, they get it. In a 21st century communication environment, we need to be very carefully navigating these spaces of difference, these spaces of connectivity, to help to smarten up the ways in which we're drawing on guides, information from social sciences, humanities research, in order to meet people where they are, in order to advance conversations, in order to help inspire greater engagement and action. So as I move through that, and I acknowledge that I'm working through dominant scientific ways of knowing about climate change, it's also important to consider that is a foundation, but that is not does not provide everything that we need. So hopefully you see popping up in front of you the many reports that have been produced through international channels, some special reports through the United Nations Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, and other outlets that are related, the World Meteorological Organization and others, that help shape the way in which we understand how the climate is changing and how humans are playing an unprecedented role in that change. So people make links between formal science and policy in their everyday lives through a range of relevant information that can come through scientific reports, but often media representational practices, often communication strategies in the more creative spaces shape those perceptions. So, this first entered into the public conversation largely in the 1980s as a pollution problem. It was framed through the sciences. And that is a very important way to consider how this moves forward. Brian Wynn, who's a scholar of science and technology studies, though, points out that the deficit model is dead. Long live the deficit model. What that means, though, is that there is this deficit model, which can be this notion that if we just provide everyone with more and more information, they or we all will make the right decision. And so we will all do the right thing. And so any deficit in that pathway to doing the right thing can be seen as ignorance, can be seen as someone who's ill-informed. And so then the ignorance can then be blamed on a lack of support for action based on scientific evidence. And so then our training within the sciences can be the belief that the public interpret this information in a rational way, that we just need to continue to provide more information, sound science, so that people ultimately make the right decision. And so facts is then, it's seen in this deficit model logic is seen as the compelling need for more and more research and more science. Now, I set this up by then complicating it to say that this is clearly not the only way in which all of us are forming our views, are learning about the ways in which we engage and interact in society. This hitting everyone over the head with more and more science can too be seen as a 20th century model of communication. It has echoes of Enlightenment thinking, where scientific facts and rationality guide optimal decision making. But it isn't that simple. So this part about how the deficit model is dead points out that we actually have a much more complex, interactive way of understanding the realities around climate change now. But the piece about the long live the deficit model is that this drive for more and more information lives on. And this actually plays on a quote from when Charles VI passed in England, was replaced by Charles VII, that while there had been this notion that while one is dead, another immediately takes place to fill that space. And so really this points out the direction that we need to be engaging in the realities as well, that while scientific knowing and learning about climate change is very prominent, that there must be much more. And so Suzanne Mosier points out in this quote at the bottom, she's a social sciences researcher, very influential scholar and practitioner, that providing information and providing knowledge gaps is at best necessary, but rarely sufficient to create active behavioral engagement. So to that, I will add that we need to be engaging in creative ways in order to inspire enduring, sustained behavioral engagement as well. And so from this space, while scientific ways of knowing provide important pathways into learning and knowing about climate change, we also must think very carefully about and experiment with emotional ways of knowing, from our worries and our concerns across to maybe our hopes, our ambitions, our desires. We can think about visceral ways of knowing, tactile ways of knowing, tangible, effective, and aesthetic ways of knowing through arts and through creative works to better fill out the ways in which we know and interact with climate change in the 21st century. And so that can bring us into these expanded pathways. So science is a component here. Excuse me, if facts are established through scientific ways of knowing, they're important, but they're not enough. We need to enlarge these considerations to address these vexing, complicated, and difficult threats. So everyday people don't engage solely with scientific literature, of course, that they're making links through the range of media that are available to them. So we can think about this maybe primarily through political protest movements that have cropped up to address concerns that folks have. There have been various climate marches, there have been various demonstrations that have taken place in a variety of ways that bring into our consciousness and bring into everyday people's lives the concerns and hopes and ambitions around climate change. And so this oftentimes can interact with science. You can see this particular protest banner that's reading about how science-based policy is needed, but we can run into the time dimensions of how we need it now and how science-based policy is driven by peer review process, which can take some time as well. And so this has led into youth demonstrations as well, young people engaging increasingly in these spaces over time, and it is enriching a multi-generational set of engagements in these creative spaces now. There are other ways in. For instance, medical doctors who had staged a creative demonstration of a die-in outside the JP Morgan offices in London, where they're protesting along medical professionals, doctors and nurses to provide a creative way to draw attention to how JP Morgan has had links to fossil fuel investments, for instance. There are many other ways as well, through popular and entertainment media, that other musical actors, other people on stage and screen, others that are putting together kids' toys are helping us engage in eco-sensitivities and awareness that can drive forward conversations and greater engagement and action. So at the bottom here, you can see that Russ Holt, who is a prominent US, before was an elected official, now works within the sciences. He essentially had said in a comment that there is nothing philosophically incompatible with science and politics, but there seem to be psychological hurdles that scientists have to overcome. The ethic in the profession is that if you stick to your science, if you're invested in how science affects public policy or public questions, just let the facts speak for themselves. But of course, there's a fallacy there. Facts by themselves are voiceless. This is to say that there are many of us within these communication spaces, within creative arts, within the sciences themselves. That means across natural, physical to social sciences and humanities, have a role to play in helping animate and helping bring to life these considerations in the 21st century. And so this can get into the spaces of different ways to animate that, such as living by example, exemplification theory, if you will, which is that concrete cases of influential actors grappling with issues like climate change, as we can see through some of these actors and celebrities, can significantly influence our awareness, our inclination to act ourselves. Essentially, that this kind of action as seen in the public domain can be viewed as infectious. So one of the book projects that I had engaged in, I wrote a book several years ago now. Cecile mentioned some of the books that I've written. This one was around creative climate communications as a way to think about how we can inspire greater conversations as pathways to engagement and action. Through this book project, I sought to understand that essential question that I provided for you earlier. What's working, where, when, why, and under what conditions? I had the opportunity to then integrate not only my own research, but that of many others as a burgeoning area in social sciences and humanities to understand what kinds of creative communications are being brought to bear as productive, to forge productive pathways into science, policy, and society interactions and progress on climate change, on water issues, and on. Through this work, one of the main points that I made through the book was that there are no silver bullets, that there is rather silver buckshot, that there are many approaches that are needed across these spaces, across the various ways of engagement with different selected audiences, instead of one key event, one key intervention that will then draw us into a new level of engagement and action. And so with that, I then focused in on comedy as part of this work. And so I will also say, as I bridge into comedy, that you can maybe note in the title that creative communications is creative climate communications with climate change in parentheses. This was my deliberate intention for two reasons, which I'll keep brief. One was that this book was written in a way that can have transferable information for a range of other science, policy, society challenges that can bridge into water issues, can bridge into many others as well. And then secondly, that this also draws our attention to when we're doing this creative work and we're engaging with folks, we may not always need to lead with climate change as an issue. We could lead through other connected issues such as environmental stewardship, such as energy security, such as what kind of legacy do you want to leave on this planet? What kind of influence do you want to have over time? So creative communications can weave its way through other connected issues in order to achieve climate objectives, water objectives, and other associated goals. But focusing in on comedy as a pathway is an important way that I've experimented primarily with a colleague here in the theater department, Beth Osnes, a longtime professor, collaborator here, of ways of learning and knowing. This is through a larger project that is called Inside the Greenhouse here, along with an ecology and evolutionary biology professor, Rebecca Safran, and a communication professor, Phaedra Pizzulo, where we've sought to expand our ways of knowing about climate change with students with whom we've worked here on this campus and elsewhere, and provide these productive pathways forward with efforts to find common ground with key selected audiences, creatively communicating and listening in a more dynamic and nonlinear way that creates space for capacity building and progress in these areas. So we have experimented with comedy as this way of learning and way of knowing, because humor has been to date, even though there are more and more folks that are experimenting with comedy as a pathway to engage in these areas, that has been generally underutilized. Comedy has the power to connect people, information, ideas, new ways of thinking and acting. This can be brought to bear in very productive ways. I'll demonstrate through a few examples here shortly. Comedy can bring to the fore multiple truths, multiple ways of knowing, in the delight of multiple meanings of ideas, statements, and words. Comedy can exploit, cracks in arguments. It can wiggle into, it can poke and prod at, it can make a nuisance of, can draw attention to incongruities in our lives, contradictions that we're living with, hypocrisies, falsehoods, pretentious dimensions of the issues that we're dealing with. Comedy can then wield this power to destabilize and threaten fundamentalist thoughts, status quo logics, in nuanced and conditional interpretations of the truths within which we live in this climate change, this changing climate. It also can prompt reconsiderations of who are considered authorized, legitimate expert voices in the productive sphere. Comedy can help shake up our understanding so that it can then provide these pathways forward for new ways of thinking and acting in the world. So for producers of comedy, which I'm going to welcome all of you to experiment very briefly with here shortly, you'll find and hopefully experience yourselves the power as it flows through comedy into these issues can enable movement between ourselves as those producing the content into revealed alternatives that can seed different fertile locations for new ways of considering up, opening up dimensions of understanding the world. So in recent years, working with Beth over the past 10 years, we found that climate change can provide these productive pathways to help young people in particular engage more fully in these conversations and as opportunities for action. And so they can themselves and we together can overcome unproductive spaces of conflict. And we ourselves have researched through the work that we've done how we can creatively advance these opportunities with our students. We've interrogated comedy through multimodal, through different dimensions of climate change, through stand-up performance, through recorded videos, through written work, to effectively meet people where they are in a variety of audiences over time. This is the 10th year, as I mentioned, with Beth, and she's there on the right on the stage, if you're seeing that next to me here. And we've then researched this work over time. We've produced many different publications, chapters, opinion pieces over time, peer-reviewed research that utilizes participant surveys, audience member surveys, analyses of content of the work itself, of the performances, and observations of the participants within them, and have been finding that comedy can provide relief amid anxiety-producing evidence. So this can provide some emotional salve for coping, but it can also bridge difficult topics and combat polarized discussion in entertaining and non-threatening ways, where it can lower defenses. And there are many challenges that through the power of comedy that we want to make sure that we're not just providing this immediate salve, but then distracting from the opportunities for engagement and action, that comedy runs the risk of trivializing critically important issues. So we've sought to tread very carefully through these politics of everyday life and the processes of comedy to engage with these critically important issues without trivializing them, but then also providing that social function and the value of humor and comedy so that we can then walk the tightrope between subversion and sedation, that we can then not just go through the process of making people laugh and the levity, the visceral levity that involves, but then also helping advance new ways of thinking through this work. We found through our research so far that comedy enhances awareness, learning and knowledge, feelings of emotion and affect, engagement and problem solving, that it can increase the salience of climate change. It can expose new audiences to new ways of learning rather than putting up defenses, maybe through scientific presentations of climate change information. But this can lower defenses. And in that, context and content both matter considerably. I'll demonstrate that in just a moment here through a few examples. This can increase accessibility of what can be complicated issues and can be seen as often distant dimensions of climate change and can bring them into one's immediate social context. These are decidedly incomplete projects, even though we've been at work with this for a while and we've been engaging with others across the country and around the world, and I'll share this with you a little bit more here in just a moment. This is still work in progress. What I can say is that through this work that Beth and I have done, along with Becca and Phaedra and many others over time, this work that we have done has worked to advance this with comedy partners, both professional comedians and those in the researcher community primarily. We continue to press ahead. One indication I can point out for you all in which this work has been having import and impact is that if you're familiar with the United Nations Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change reports, the most recent 6th assessment report that came out in 2022, this is from the 3rd working group. I highlight for you an excerpt within that 3rd working group report that shows that work that we've done along with work of other researchers has had an influence, has now been a part of these UN IPCC reports, where they state themselves a broad variety of media platforms cover climate change issues and creative narratives using humor and entertainment have an influence on these ongoing scientific and policy processes. So as I then pivot into it, I can share with you, I've shared with you a bit of our research. I can share with you a bit of our work in experimentation as well. So in our early years, we had engaged in live performance with students and with others here in our local community. When the COVID-19 pandemic hit in 2020, we pivoted into an online space like many of you all have done, what we're doing here together today. We took advantage of the opportunities to engage with people around the world. We then also were able to employ comedians that were out of work, much like many other folks, who then started to work with our students in veritable writers' rooms with them. We then had shows that we aired online. All of this is available on our Climate Comedy YouTube channel if you'd like to take a look at that sometime later. That's at the bottom of this slide. But you can see some of the public intellectuals, some of the personalities, some of the notable climate scientists and journalists, as well as comedians that began to engage during these pandemic times in the shows that we then produced. Once we started to emerge again, we began to work in theaters here locally. And then once we got back up on stage, we moved into here locally a large Boulder theater. We've had audiences of over 500 people now coming together to share in the laughter, to advance conversations about climate change comedy. We've also then been able to seed performances that are taking place in many other places, and I'll share a little bit more on that with you in just a moment. I do want to point out that our main collaborator, you might see in the Zoom screen that's depicted here on this slide, you can see myself, you can see Beth Osnes, who's there, and then also Chuck Nice. He's co-host of Star Talk with Neil deGrasse Tyson, and he's been our main professional comedian, collaborator, and partner over time. And he's helped to recruit other professional comedians to work with us in a variety of ways within these writers' rooms with our students, and then also working in the classroom and then on stage with them. I want to provide for you one example of those professional comedian performers. His name is Stuart Goldsmith. It's great. I hope some of you have heard his name before. Stuart has been working with us for the last several years. Hopefully, as I toggle across to this screen of YouTube, you can just get a sense of some of Stuart's work very briefly.
Hi there, Stuart Goldsmith here. I just wanted to talk to you briefly about the motivation to change, because I think that when we recycle, we often think that recycling is an attempt to change the world all by ourselves, and it feels pointless. But you shouldn't do it like that. You should do it to be just to be a tiny particle of a great wave of change. Recycling should be like voting, inconceivable to young people.
So what we had done with Stuart Goldsmith is that we had recruited him from his home in Bristol in the UK to work with us and our students, and we integrated that into live shows that we had then performed. Stuart is one example of the many comedians with whom we've worked over the years. So putting back up the slideshow, on the left-hand side, we've just celebrated the first decade of work together, and you can see the many different comedian collaborators that we've worked with over time. These are folks that have written for popular US late night shows. Yes.
Mike, can you flip your displays again, because we see your presenter notes?
Oh yes, of course. Sorry about that.
No problem.
That. Thank you, Cecile.
Thank you.
All right, I will fix that. Thank you. Much better now?
Yeah, perfect. Thank you.
Good. So the different professional comedians with whom we've worked are on the left. It's increasingly been an international group of comedians. So on the right is just short bios. I know you may not be able to read all these. I'm happy to share them later. Comedians that we're working with internationally. I point out to you Satya Maroof, who's in yellow on the bottom right on the poster, and then also featured here on the right as well. She was wonderful working with us from Indonesia, and she calls herself the first Muslim female stand-up comic. And she had done wonderful work that had brought in cultural dimensions of working within Indonesia and within her Muslim faith to talk about how climate change impacts communities there and impacts folks with whom she has worked and her family and her friends and her communities over time. And so working with our students has opened up all these ways for us all to be rethinking the ways in which we're talking about and considering climate change in the 21st century. So Stuart is an example of a repeat professional comedian with whom we've worked, and we've been working with many others over time now, with Chuck as our lead. So I mentioned in brief that we've been able to seed various shows happening in other places around the country and around the world. These are the ones that we had supported over time across the United States and then over in Bangladesh, as well as in London this year. And this has been through funds that we've been able to raise through the Argosy Foundation, who are listed here. And we hope to continue this going forward so that you can share with your communities potentially some of the opportunities that we have going forward. So please keep a lookout for that. I now want to just highlight a little bit that we did in 2025, just this past Earth Day, where we gathered in our Boulder Theater with professional comedians Nat Towson, Chuck Nice, and Brittany Bell Surratt, and along with over 500 people who were in our audience there. And Brittany Bell Surratt actually is somebody who is with Hip Hop Caucus, which is a large voter organization, voter registration and social movements organization here in the United States. And it's part of an ongoing partnership that we have working with Hip Hop Caucus going forward. And we actually are going to be putting together a show and a workshop with young comedians in New Orleans next month in the lead up to the 20th anniversary commemoration of Hurricane Katrina, providing links to a changing climate that had taken place back in 2005, a devastating event that impacted New Orleans and throughout the South. So just to maybe animate a little bit of this, I'll provide a few short videos as well of a couple performances from Chuck and from Nat, just to help give you a sense of this show. So hopefully you can see this with Chuck, and I'll play this short.
I was listening to NPR some time ago, and I heard a report on sustainable deconstruction, which is something that's happening here in Boulder as hopefully a pilot for the rest of the country. And it's where you carefully dismantle a house the same way you build it, but you're doing it in reverse so that you can salvage the materials for reuse and recycling. And you guys are doing that where nobody else is, but you know, I'm from Philly, and I got to tell you, Philly beat you to it. Philly beat you to it, yeah. Back in the 90s, we had something called crackheads. That's right. And you didn't have to hire anybody. You didn't need a workforce. All you had to do was move out of your house on a Tuesday. By Wednesday afternoon, there was no piping left, no fixtures, no copper wire, no nothing. Crackheads, always ahead of their time. I was listening.
So you can see that maybe this was doing several things at once. In this piece, he's introducing the notion of green infrastructure, the notion of recycling materials, the notion of a place, Boulder, Colorado, engaging in this for a variety of reasons that relate to climate and environment sensibility, and then also relating this back to cultural dimensions of the community where he's from on the East Coast of the United States, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. And so by using that comedic pathway of communication, you might see, this is embedded within a US cultural context, but you might then see how he then opens up this idea of green infrastructure through that very short clip in a minute. I'll play one more for you from Nat Towson from this show, just to give you a sense of this as well.
But I really am trying to eat a plant-based diet, but it's hard. It's made me really, is anyone here like straight up vegan? Okay, right up here in front. All right, great. Okay, we got a few. Yeah, I feel for you people. It's got to be hard to be vegan because you're right. Like, you're correct. And as we've established, we all know that. And the lifestyle that you have done, you've opted to do with no one forcing you to do it, could be the lifestyle change that, if adopted en masse, is essential to our survival as a species. But you are technically annoying.
Okay, so Nat Towson making a point that veganism actually is for purely environmental reasons is clearly much more effective than, say, even than fish, pescatarian diets and on. But nonetheless, there are certain sort of elements of it that are associated with it too. So what I think I'd like to just say here briefly, I think I'm going to skip over a sketch that I had planned to show you in the interest of time. But I also just want to point out, I took away my screen share for now so you can see me, that these shows that we produce, and so maybe this can be useful for you all as well, that if you engage in these spaces, what we've tried to do is to bring people together. We've effectively been able to bring hundreds of people together in these shared spaces, in these collective conversations that provide rare opportunities for one another, where we then make this a productive and fun place for people to engage. Now, there is always a time and a place for everything, and there is a time and a place to provide this sobering scientific information, primarily to selected audiences. This work experimentally tries to do that, but in a humorous way, and in bringing people in through collective laughter, through that visceral, involuntary sort of set of engagements, so that people want to be there. And it's helped us attract, many different celebrities into these spaces that then can leverage even greater engagement and action too. And just to maybe illustrate that very briefly, I'll just share with you Neil deGrasse Tyson himself, who I hope some of you know at this point, who is an influential scientist in this country, we've developed an awards, Creative Climate Communication Award that we've been giving for the last 10 years plus. And Neil deGrasse Tyson here, Dr. Tyson, is accepting it, and he talks a little bit about the essence of the project itself. And so I'm going to play that for you briefly.
Beth and Max, Neil deGrasse Tyson here, your personal astrophysicist. I want to thank you for awarding Star Talk, which I host and co-hosted by Chuck Nice, this award. Gears are things that people don't appreciate anymore because we have computers that don't use gears. But when you see what gears do, you move one of them and all the others start rotating as well. And you were reminded firsthand of how action in one place has consequences elsewhere. And so I find this to be a quite fitting emblem of the need for climate change action, because we're all turning knobs, most of us not knowing what the consequences are or will be. So thank you. We create Star Talk postings. I don't always know who's watching or if it's going to matter at all. The fact that we receive this is evidence that we're doing something good in the world. Thank you.
So I share that with you for many, many reasons. And so you might have picked up on it just in one viewing of it. But, he talks about how we're creating content. We don't always know what kind of an effect that'll have. But he continues to do the work, and he appreciates that feedback. And he understands that we're all working together. This is a collective action problem. And so even with his notoriety as a public intellectual, that he sees how we all need to be working together. I'm going to provide one other aspect of this work that we're doing just as I wrap things up. I'm going to put it on duplicate slideshow again. Just as we still have these live shows too, I want to invite all of you from where you are to keep this in mind going forward. We've had an international video contest for the last decade as well. This past cycle, this year, we received 94 submissions from 29 countries. For us, this has been a really fascinating way to see different cultural interpretations across different languages, as well, of comedy about climate change. So you can see the different countries, the 29 countries where we received these submissions. We put this up on Film Freeway. Happy to provide the information for the next, for the 2026 competition. And then what we have is a panel of our students and others here within the community of research and professional comedians that then judge these. So there's about 40 different judges, and we have winners every year. We've posted our winners on our website, and this has been a real opportunity to come together to understand, again, that essential question: what works, how, when, why, and under what circumstances? And with that, maybe, even though I am running up against time, maybe I will share a brief, just the first place winner here, which comes from a group called Yellow Dot Studios. Adam McKay, who's been a film director and producer here in the United States over time, influential, had directed Don't Look Up, among several different film projects. And he's got a studio out in Los Angeles, which has been experimenting with climate change content, and much of it comedic. So maybe I'll just show that for you, and we're going to get into the workshop here very shortly. I'm going to show you this one first. I have to just leave it here.
Have you ever done something bad? Like lied about going gluten-free just for the attention? Or maybe you stole a pen from a bank? Or maybe you lost your friend's disabled dog? Well, I've got good news for you. There's an easy way to cancel out all the bad things you do in your life. Reducing your food waste. Do you know that food waste accounts for 10% of greenhouse gases? That's 5 times the amount of all airplanes. And that makes the planet hotter than your undies when your office crush walks by. In just a few easy steps, you can make your karma score go way up. For example, did you borrow money from your kid's college fund to help pay for your filler? Prioritize eating perishables that go bad first. Did you start a rumor that your ex can't do basic math? Start storing food properly to keep it fresh, like throw your bread in the freezer to make it last. Maybe you slept with your subordinate, but he's older than you, so it's confusing. There's always going to be food scraps, so make sure they go in the compost and not the trash. You could even axe murder someone, as long as you plan to eat the remains. Oh, I guess that's too far.
So through this video, Yellow Dot Studios had brought in intersecting issues: food waste, food consumption, and with humor had helped communicate this in a way that was compelling and engaging for the judges in this year's panel. So there were many from all across the world, of those 29 countries that I have up here again for you. And it's an opportunity for others to engage in the creative spaces in this way. So as I pivot into inviting you all to experiment with me for just a little bit, I want to share with you, though, first, some of the key tenets that came out of the research that I did for this book, Creative Climate Communication. And some of them may be fairly straightforward, but nonetheless, it's worth emphasizing here. First of all, being authentic is very important to effective communications, creative communications about climate change, environment, water, and on. That understanding your own lived experiences, your own perspective, how they can be brought to bear on these issues is critically important for resonating with the audiences that you seek to reach. Secondly, as a connected piece, is be aware of those audiences you seek to reach. that we can tailor communications in very different ways for different selected audiences. For instance, for the young college-age students that we work with primarily here, maybe the, say, 18 to 30-year-olds that we work with, here is very different than if we're trying to reach other communities, maybe older communities, 65 and older, living in rural communities, for example. So being aware of your audience that can then drive forward the communications that you put together. Third, being accurate, understanding what are the scientific dimensions of this, understanding where the social science and humanities research that helps guide effective communications is very important. There's a long time now past climate scientist Stephen Schneider, who talked about knowing thyself, knowing thy audience, and knowing thy stuff. That is being authentic, being aware, and being accurate. And then fourth and fifth here, I have being imaginative, being creative in these spaces, that we need to be pushing against what the ways in which we've been talking about this in the past in order to achieve greater engagement and action is very important now. And being bold as you've made those choices is critically important. The other five on this side are also can be guiding influences as you're moving forward with your work. Finding common ground is critically important to reaching your audiences and compelling positive engagement and action. Emphasizing the here and now rather than distant in time and space, talking about how it impacts people in their communities here and now can be very compelling. Focusing in as well on the benefits of engagement, not just what are the costs, what are the challenges, but also what can be gained from greater engagement in climate, water, environmental issues can be very effective. Creatively empowering people in these spaces. One need not rely solely on PhD scientists in order to engage and communicate, have conversations about these issues, that we can creatively empower ourselves at all different perspectives and stages of life. And then finally, again, recognizing that we are in a 21st century communications environment, that we need to smarten up the ways in which we're talking about these issues and use the guides of previous lessons learned and integrate those lessons learned into the work that we're doing now. Okay, so we're going to experiment here. I want to then turn to each of you. I take this out of presenter mode, I realize, just to put up all of this. I want to turn to each of you. Cecile has prepared some breakout rooms as well. And we're going to work on, just for the next 20 minutes, how to sell a solution or a remedy, how to get us to engage from the societal scale down to the individual scale. It's your choice. Think of one climate solution or climate remedy or ways to alleviate the negative impacts of climate change that you'd like for others to adopt. So here's one example. Don't drive to your workout gym, run or pedal your bicycle. That can be an example of just an everyday idea that can be integrated into how you're going to then work on coming up with 3 reasons why this is such a great solution or such a great remedy. And make that 3rd reason. So you think of 3 reasons why you don't drive to the workout, right? Why you run or pedal your bicycle. Make the 3rd reason contain some kind of element of comedic surprise. So 1 and 2 can be earnest reasons why, about emissions reductions, about maybe getting stuck in traffic, the pains of parking, and on, the expensive dimensions of owning a car and having a car. And then the 3rd one can be comedic. For example, in this notion of running or pedaling, all that fresh air and sunshine might inspire you to quit your gym membership. If they ask you why, you can say, it just didn't work out, for example. So what we're going to do, I'm going to stop sharing here, and maybe I can turn to you, Cecile, and to you, Shay, as well. Thank you. If we could then get into those breakout rooms, we can repost these instructions for you. And as you can see at the bottom, what I had posted is breakout rooms of 4 people together. We may do more, I think I understand from Shay and from Cecile, that take a few minutes to think about it, but then start to workshop, start to share with one another. And then we'll come back together and we will be asking you for volunteers to share your examples. Sound good?
Yeah. Thanks, Max. And we had a couple of questions, but maybe we can discuss those questions in your breakouts, hear from each other what you think. As previous workshop, we will ask you to answer this poll that you see showing up on your screen to choose your language. So you can be paired with people who speak the same language. So take a few seconds to answer this poll. And then from that, we will open breakout rooms. As Max said, the ideal size of the group is 4, but to make sure you all go with people in the room, we will make rooms slightly bigger. If you think you're too many, or if you're alone in your room, please come back in this room and then we can reassign you. And as usual, if you haven't been assigned to a room, please type in the chat which language you want to join, and then we can move you to a specific room. Looks like, and of course, if you don't want to be assigned, if you don't want to participate in this group exercise, you're welcome to either leave the space or remain in the main room and ask your questions here. So I think we have about 30 people who answered, so we can create the rooms now. We'll put you in rooms of 8. So hopefully you'll be between 2 and 8 in the room, and then you can do the exercise that Max mentioned. The instructions are in the chat in 3 languages, and they will also be in the Google Drive, which I realize they're not yet, but I'll share the link again.
And while you do that, Cecile, just to say that if it's unclear, if the instructions are unclear, just use the chat so we can provide any clarifications before you go into the breakout rooms. And we also encourage you to be active and to interact very much with others in the breakout rooms.
And take the lead on facilitation. One of you takes the lead on facilitation and share the questions, and we will pop in and out to ensure everything is fine. So I think we can end the poll now, Shay, and set up the breakouts.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back. Give folks a little bit more time as they re-enter the main space. Hope you all had productive conversations. I'd like to ask a few of you to share a bit of what came out of your conversation, both in terms of the product, what you put together, in terms of that, terms of assembling that 3-part, 3 reasons why, and then also a little bit about process too. So maybe Cecile, just let me know when you think everyone's back, and then I'll.
Everyone's back now.
Okay. Great. Well, so the prompt for you all to go out to the breakout rooms was to think of one climate solution or remedy or way to alleviate the negative impacts of climate change that you want others to adopt, and then 3 reasons why it's a great step, and the 3rd being humorous. It's a big challenge to ask of each of you, right? But would anybody like to volunteer a bit about the process within their breakout room? Elena, could I call on you? Please unmute yourself and then share if you would.
Yes, hello everyone. We were having many ideas, but the umbrella of it is that we're going to do something special on our birthday date. So we're going to have less shower, because if we use shower, of course, we use water energy. So on the next birthday, nobody's showering more than 2 minutes. How to feel it, like we're going to play our favorite song, and we know that when the song finishes, we have to run out. After that, we will go to plant a tree on every birthday. But since most of us are living in urban places like Dubai or any other place, maybe we'll have to travel like 10 minutes or more, or maybe 30 minutes, because we also don't want the tree to die the next day, because it's like a spiritual thing. The day something that happens on your birthday will influence all your time later on during the year. So we need also to find the ground where this tree can be alive. And we welcome all the people around. And also we were talking about, you were playing the YouTube where the lady was talking about veggies, like to become vegetarian. And we were thinking like, shall we become vegetarian from tomorrow? But then we thought that it will be a huge carbon footprint, because like the table, on the table, she had a lot of stuff which was imported. So maybe people who want to be vegetarians, they have to eat whatever is actually born in the country, like grown in the country that they are actually live in, or they have to move like to Asia and be vegetarians there. So these are decisions you can take on your birthday, since starting from the next birthday you have. So that was our thought. Maybe we have some more.
Those are great ideas. Yeah, those are fantastic ways to kind of think about what could be relatable, how you might use humor to enter into them, but then also advance some real issues that we're facing together. Thank you very much. Good job. Thank you, Elena. Is there time for one more volunteer to share what happened in your breakout group? Anyone else want to volunteer?
Sure.
Great. Thank you, Anna.
Great. I had a good discussion with Jane, and she came up with the idea to eat more local and seasonal produce to reduce your carbon footprint. And so we came up with 3 reasons together. And one was that veggies and fruits are more tasty when they're in season. And another one was even, to go in your own garden. If you grow your own vegetables, you can reduce the pesticides and fertilizers in your body as well. And then the humorous one was that if you eat local produce, then you can go on a cruise rather than paying for the veggies holiday.
Nice. That's great. You came up with good material just in that short period of time.
Yeah,
excellent.
I thought that was fun, but it wasn't easy.
Yeah. Tell me a little bit more about that, and then maybe others can share as well about the process beyond the material that you produced itself. The process wasn't easy, you're saying. Can you say a little bit more?
No, I mean, I was thinking, because I live in a country where we have plenty of groundwater, and there's lots of water in the pipes, and I have a teenager that takes very, very, very long showers, and it's hard to get to him when he's in the shower. But I found it very hard to address that issue because it's very personal. And to actually find a humorous way to address it without making him the bad guy. Yeah, so that was kind of the hurdle that I couldn't really get past.
Yeah, gotcha. That's interesting though. So then it can help put on the table some of the challenges that we're facing, some of the contradictions that we're living by.
Yeah.
Hygiene is great. Maybe too long a shower is not so great.
Yeah.
Are there others who would be willing to share a little bit about the process? Was it easy? Was it challenging? How do you feel about taking very serious, complex, important topics and introducing an element of humor as you're communicating about them? How is that process for anyone? I don't see any more volunteers.
I'm curious to hear from you, Christina, as you asked the question in a bit of that angle, when you said, like, are there certain boundaries to consider when using comedy, especially with without reinforcing stereotypes and everything. I wonder if you discussed that in your group, or if, Max, you want to address this in terms of boundaries.
Yeah, sure. What actually was interesting is that we didn't thought about the audience that was getting the punchline. So it's very different to talk. Our discussion was, for example, about the transition to train, the use of train in Europe, for policymakers to decide on this. But when we touched like the matter on train, it was so different for someone from Canada. Like the experience in train is so different from Europe because it's super slow, it's boring. But for us, maybe coming from Latin America, experiencing a train in Europe, it's like a life-saving expenses experience. Like you have to save your whole life to maybe think I'm getting on a train in Europe. And it's luxury and it's trendy. So that was actually sort of the humorous part of it. But when we tried to do the exercise, it was like, okay, not only do we have to take care of not being so dark or maybe touching sensitive matters, but also thinking like, who's going to make you, like, are you trying to make laugh the people that are going to use the train or the policymakers? So that was actually the sort of the tricky part, because you don't know who do you want to make laugh though at the end.
Yeah. Excellent comments. I'm seeing some comments coming into the chat too. These are all really interesting. It seems that we can very easily go past time. I think we only have about a minute left. Is that right, Cecile? That I'd love to be able to respond to your comments, but I think that as we're running out of time, maybe I'll just wrap by sharing a few final thoughts of mine, if I could. So if you can see my slides again. And I really thank you all for your time and for engaging in this session. It really is a unique opportunity for us to come together across many different countries and places. I want to leave you with some practical takeaways. Always considering this context, as you've just raised, is very important. That can include context of audience, that can include context of where you are, what place, and on and on. But talking about these issues is our best chance for addressing them. The more that we end up choosing not to talk about them, we forfeit opportunities for engaging with one another. Listening to others' perspectives is also critically important. And then engaging in these spaces creatively, these conversations together. And without getting trapped in the logics of individuals only. We know this is a collective action problem, so join groups like this one, amplify your voice, maybe start to experiment with comedy with one of your community groups, and then contribute to the video competition next year. But we need to be working for the kind of systemic change that's needed. Decarbonization is about unmaking and remaking our industries, our societies anew. We have the tools to do it. We need to harness the creative powers through comedy and other ways in order to work for the systemic change that's needed and warranted now. So at this point, our response is, do they meet the scale of the challenges? The answer currently is no, but can we create better futures? My response is emphatically yes. And so with that, I do thank you all. I'm going to stop sharing my screen again. I am happy to share with Cecile and Shay and others the slides that I've presented here with you all today. Happy to follow up if you'd like to follow up with me, but sincerely appreciate your time, and I'll pass it along to Cecile once again.
Well, I really wanted to thank you, Max, for this very insightful session and for the group exercise. Thank you, Shay, for making everything work so smoothly over the last 8 sessions. Thank you, the Greenforce Foundation and Anne, for supporting this program and making it possible. And then, yeah, I look forward to receiving your pitch for the story for our August 14th session. I look forward to seeing you on August 14th. And please look at check out for an email from me with the evaluation for this workshop. We really look forward to your feedback. That really helps us to build a stronger program for next year. And yeah, don't forget to register for Worldwide Week as well, online or in person. I'll be happy to see you there. With that, thanks again, everyone. And I look forward to seeing you soon. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Cecile.
Thank you.
Goodbye.
Bye.